PlayStation versus Xbox is arguably the biggest rivalry in video games. I don't know if any others have been quite as direct, highly publicized, or impactful. I mean, it has been referred to as a console war, and you know it must be intense if they're using the word war to describe it. In a weird way, I almost feel like I've been a part of it, because unlike most other rivalries on this scale that go way back and take place mostly behind the scenes, I've been watching this one progress almost from the beginning in the early 2000s. Another thing that makes it unique is that PlayStation and Xbox are not companies themselves, they're products, each made by a much larger company that was already well established before entering the video game market. Sony is a Japanese company that was primarily involved in electronics and entertainment before releasing the PlayStation, and Microsoft is an American company mostly concerned with computers, specifically software like the Windows operating system, before releasing the Xbox. So you can see how these companies are actually a lot different from each other, with video games being the only major area where they overlap into each other's territory. And before I say anything else, I want to acknowledge that Nintendo, of course, has been right there alongside the other two, releasing consoles and games, sometimes even at a higher level. However, I think most would agree that they have been kind of doing their own thing and have not been as directly competitive as the other two. So to keep things simple for this video, I want to leave Nintendo mostly out of it as I outline what has been happening between PlayStation and Xbox from the beginning throughout 4 generations of consoles. Though, oddly enough, it was Nintendo that first got Sony involved with video games. Being an electronics company from the same country, Sony created this advanced audio chip for the SNES that sparked a friendly working relationship between the two. From there, they worked together to create a wild gaming system called the PlayStation that would play SNES cartridges and CD-ROMs. It was never officially launched to the public, and one of the few that was ever produced was later sold at an auction for over $300,000, so the Nintendo PlayStation has become a legend in gaming. The reason it was never widely produced is because the two companies could not agree on the terms, and Nintendo was a bit disrespectful in the way they handled it. The story goes that at the last minute, right as everything was being announced, they abandoned Sony in favor of a European partner called Philips. Understandably, Sony was upset with the situation, so they ended up pushing forward with the PlayStation on their own. They released it in late 1994, initially in Japan, and from day one, it was a big success. 3-dimensional gameplay in some iconic series like Resident Evil, Gran Turismo, and Crash Bandicoot attracted millions of customers and helped it become a sensation. It only took 4 years for the PS1 to surpass the Walkman as Sony's best-selling electronics product. In total, it sold over 100 million units, and the craziest part is that the second PlayStation was even more popular. That is going to lead me into my first comparison, the PlayStation 2 versus the original Xbox. See, throughout the second half of the 1990s, while the PlayStation 1 was making its way into people's homes, Microsoft was aggressively trying to get Windows 95 and then Windows 98 into people's homes. And when Sony started developing the more powerful PlayStation 2 that was likely going to have the ability to play DVDs, it made Microsoft nervous. They were looking at it as like a computer for the living room, which is venturing into their territory, so they felt that they would be losing ground unless they got involved in it in some way. At first, they tried approaching Sony and Nintendo, wanting to develop, I guess, a special version of Windows for their consoles, but they all declined. It is rumored that Microsoft then considered acquiring Sega, but ultimately ended up developing their own computer-like gaming console that, ironically, did not utilize Windows. It was revealed to the public on stage by Bill Gates in early 2001 and released toward the end of that year, and I have to say, Microsoft put a lot of effort into it. At the time, during an interview, Bill Gates said, "We are so committed to this thing. When we do something, we stick to it." They acquired the developer Bungie so they could have Halo Combat Evolved as a launch title. They spent $500 million marketing the Xbox in just about every way that you could imagine. I'm talking about television commercials, in-store displays, they had trailers touring the country, setting up in spots with DJs where people could test the system. They gave away thousands of them through a promotion with Taco Bell. And to establish themselves in the market, they were selling the system at a loss, estimated to be as much as $100 per unit. I would say that Microsoft did as much as you could reasonably expect, but unfortunately for them, for this generation, PlayStation was simply unstoppable. The PlayStation 2 was everything people wanted at the time. It was backwards compatible for the 100 million people who had already bought PS1 games, it added a bunch of cool new titles, it had that DVD player, and it was released well over a year before the Xbox. 25 million people had already bought a PS2 before they were even able to buy an Xbox. The movie Lara Croft Tomb Raider, based on the popular PlayStation game, made over $200 million in the months leading up to the Xbox release. Even though Xbox had the incredible power of Microsoft behind it, it was always a massive underdog, and in the end, I think the numbers reflect that. In fact, nothing has ever outsold the PS2. It remains the best-selling console of all time, so that was a tough battle that I cannot really blame Xbox for losing. For the next generation, it was the PlayStation 3 against the Xbox 360, and this right here is where Sony made some of their biggest mistakes. Going in, they had two major things going for them. Obviously, the momentum from the previous two consoles and the Blu-ray. Blu-ray, as I'm sure you already know, is like a higher definition DVD format that is made by Sony. To help promote their two products, they made it so that the PS3 could play Blu-rays, which was a very attractive feature that Xbox simply could not match. They did not want to integrate the Sony product into their system, so their best answer was to separately sell an accessory that could play the competing format HD DVD, a format that was quickly discontinued, partially because the PS3 helped make the Blu-ray so popular. But aside from that, the Xbox 360 was probably the more attractive console. Xbox Live had become popular, it had exclusive titles like Gears of War and of course the Halo series that was setting sales records with the release of each sequel. Also consider the fact that the 360 was launched almost a full year before the PS3, so during that time, all the PlayStation fans were stuck on the older generation, unless they switched over to Xbox. And then, even when the PS3 was finally made available, it cost a whopping $499 for the lowest 20GB model, and an extra $100 for the 60GB model. Back then, customers almost expected a $299 price point. That was the price of the PS1, the PS2, the original Xbox, and the base model for the competing Xbox 360. So due to all these factors, the 360 outsold the PS3 for many years and ultimately did outsell it in North America, but on a global scale, when it was all said and done, the PS3 did sell more units than the 360 by a small margin. So setting the stage for the next generation, it was really looking like Microsoft might finally be able to come out on top, and well, the next comparison is the PlayStation 4 versus the Xbox One, and I know the naming gets more confusing with each generation. Unlike the others, these two were released within a week of each other in North America in November of 2013. The issue here is that the Xbox team at the time seems to have had a very different vision for the console compared to what the users wanted from it. The Xbox One was initially announced as some sort of all-in-one multimedia device where the outside features were seemingly emphasized more than the gaming aspects. It came with an HDMI input where you could plug in your cable box, and it was bundled with Kinect for voice and motion commands that turned out to be a disaster. If nothing else, it was surprising and confusing, and on top of that, they announced this digital licensing system where games had to be linked to your account, making it difficult to share them with your friends or sell them when you are done playing them. Actually, PlayStation took advantage of that opportunity by making a comedic video showing how easy it was to share their games, so Xbox did end up changing that system. It is hard to convey the extent of this without going into all the details, but I'm just going to say that Xbox had never gotten more backlash from the public. The person in charge of the department left the company in the time between the announcement and the launch, so it was clearly not the strong follow-up to the 360 that they were hoping for. I think they were also trying to limit their losses here, because they had been losing money on these consoles for over a decade now, not to mention over $1 billion that they had to spend repairing 360s that were victim to that red ring of death issue. So considering the cost of including that Kinect sensor, they set the price point at $499, $100 more than the PlayStation 4. Phil Spencer, the current leader of the department at Microsoft, later said, "We lost the worst generation to lose in the Xbox One." Comparatively, about twice as many PS4s were sold, proving that a lot of people made that jump from Xbox to PlayStation during that time. Finally, the last comparison is between the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Xbox Series S, or the upgraded Series X, this time released only a couple of days apart. Honestly, this matchup is probably less important than any of the ones before it. Phil Spencer has essentially admitted that Xbox has lost the console wars and shifted the company's strategy to value the games and their streaming platform Game Pass above everything else. See, throughout all of this, having certain games exclusive to the console has been one of the main ways to attract users. I have not talked about it too much here because it is subjective depending on which games you like, and they have mostly kept up with each other in their own ways. But we have to recognize that compared to Sony, Microsoft is a much larger and more powerful company. That is pretty much how they forced their way into the console market in the first place, and lately, Microsoft has been using that advantage to acquire various developers and publishers of video games. A few of the bigger examples would be in 2014, they paid $2.5 billion to buy the company behind Minecraft. In 2021, they paid $7.5 billion to buy ZeniMax Media, and in 2023, they paid almost $70 billion to buy Activision Blizzard. I mean, they own the rights to multiple mega franchises, and if they were to make them all exclusive to Xbox, well then yeah, Xbox would almost certainly pull ahead of PlayStation. But they have a wider focus beyond the consoles, and have even been releasing former exclusives to the PlayStation 5. Not surprisingly, the PS5 has sold considerably more units than the new Xbox Series, but the console war is not exactly what it used to be. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about everything that has happened between PlayStation and Xbox, and which side have you favored over the years? Have you switched sides between generations, or have you remained loyal to one of them? I also want to ask, what do you see for the future of these consoles? Will Microsoft eventually discontinue the Xbox in favor of making only the games, similar to what happened to Sega, or will something happen to reignite the war and restart with a new generation? And any other thoughts you have about PlayStation or Xbox, leave them in the comments. I'd like to hear what you have to say.
It is truly the future of video games, and I'm very excited to simply be a part of it if you smell what The Rock is cooking.
Thank you for watching.
Piracy is making a major comeback. No, not that kind. Video piracy. Remember when streaming was supposed to be the hero that killed piracy? Yeah, that didn't happen. And the reasons why are obvious. Subscription prices are skyrocketing, shows are getting pulled from libraries, and exclusive content is being scattered across a dozen different services. Instead of making our lives easier, streaming has morphed into cable 2.0. Expensive, fragmented, and frustrating. Want to watch Severance? You'll need Apple TV. Rewatch The Office? Well, it used to be on Netflix, but now you'll need Peacock. Sports? One game is on DAZN, another on Fubo. How are you even supposed to keep track of where everything is? These days, finding that one specific movie you want to watch feels like a chore. You're gonna need Google, maybe even a VPN, and while you're at it, may as well pull out your credit card because it's probably on a streaming service that you don't have. Somehow, we've never had more entertainment available, yet we're constantly struggling to find and afford the stuff we actually want to watch. Piracy has once again become the most convenient option, but it doesn't have to be. Look at music. They eventually figured it out. Imagine how stupid it would be if you could only listen to Kendrick Lamar on Spotify while Drake was exclusive to Apple Music. Actually, given their beef, they might like that, so never mind. In the early 2000s, music piracy, fueled by sites like Napster and LimeWire, had the music industry in full-blown panic. Piracy wasn't just winning because it was free, it was winning because it offered a superior service. Why would anyone bother going out to a store to buy a $10 CD just to hear that one song they liked? Napster and LimeWire gave you exactly what you wanted. The music industry slowly came to terms with this being the future of music consumption, and in 2003, Apple launched the iTunes Music Store, selling digital downloads for 99 cents a song. For music lovers who weren't already pirating music, iTunes was incredible. It made music more accessible, arguably more affordable, and completely reshaped how we discover new artists. But for the pirates, it didn't offer anything they didn't already have. The game changer didn't arrive until 2008, when Spotify gave music pirates a real reason to quit. Suddenly, the iTunes model was obsolete. We stopped buying music altogether and started paying a monthly fee for all-you-can-stream access. The price was right, and the convenience was too. It became clear that if you wanted to actually stop piracy, you simply had to provide a better alternative.
I would have thought that was obvious.
At the same time as the music industry was seeing this massive transformation, the internet was making video piracy a lot more accessible. Regulators' efforts to combat video piracy weren't working. They mostly relied on vague threats and public service announcements like this one. The only success that came from this PSA was an unintentional meme about downloading a car, which, let's be honest, we all would if we could.
You downloaded this vehicle.
Yes.
Well, that's stealing.
How's it stealing? I made an exact copy. I didn't steal anything from anyone.
You took potential profits from Toyota.
I wasn't going to buy a Hilux either way. They've lost no money. This hurts no one.
That's actually quite a good argument for online piracy.
I pirated this vehicle.
When Netflix had begun pivoting from mailing out DVD rentals into becoming an internet streaming company, this was a real solution, combating piracy with convenience, much like Spotify did for music. Why bother dealing with shady torrent sites, pop-up ads for who knows what, and low-quality bootlegs when you could pay a few bucks a month for unlimited, high-quality content? Of course, piracy didn't disappear entirely, but illegally downloading content that was readily available on Netflix seemed kinda pointless. This was the streaming golden age. Netflix was on its way to becoming a central place for all your favorite movies and TV shows, that is, until competition arrived. Suddenly, your favorite movies and shows weren't all in one place anymore. Disney Plus, Hulu, Peacock, and a slew of others entered their arena, all vying for your attention and your dollars. Unlike Spotify and Apple Music, which offer virtually the same music libraries, video streaming took a completely different turn. Content on one platform cannot coexist somewhere else. We were apparently all naive to assume that it could. These streaming services have now made it clear that nothing is permanent. Warner Bros. Discovery pulled Westworld and a bunch of other HBO shows from HBO Max to avoid paying residuals, Disney Plus has been caught removing original films and series without warning, and Netflix is notorious for constantly rotating its library, making it impossible to rely on the service for long-term access to anything. Even digital purchases aren't safe anymore. Amazon has been caught deleting or restricting access to movies that customers had actually bought. So let me get this straight. You pay for a streaming service, you get emotionally invested in a show, and then one day it vanishes without a trace? And the only surefire way to watch it whenever you want is to download it illegally? Yeah, that'll definitely kill piracy. While the streaming wars began as a battle royale for content supremacy, licensing disputes and complex streaming contracts have soured the entire industry. Like, why could Disney Plus subscribers in the US watch The Bear, while those in Australia couldn't? These kinds of headaches are a big part of why streaming companies have morphed into becoming their own production studios. Netflix originals like Squid Game should, in theory, be available forever and accessible everywhere. This evolution of streaming companies producing their own content means you're no longer subscribing to the platform with the best catalog of acquisitions. You're essentially investing into a single studio that's hopefully producing something good. Netflix is planning to drop a staggering $18 billion on content in 2025 alone, with the lion's share going to originals, like finally delivering the last season of Stranger Things, even if the years of delays make it hard for the actors to still pass as kids, but whatever.
How do you do, fellow kids?
What?
At some point, Netflix and its rivals will start seeing diminishing returns on their massive spending on original content and on what they can reasonably charge subscribers. If Netflix decided to spend $100 billion on new content, would you be willing to shell out $200 a month for it? Probably not. There's only so much content we can consume, and it's not like every original is a hit. The few must-watch movies and shows remain scattered across too many different platforms. According to Deloitte's Digital Media Trends report, the average US streaming video subscriber pays for 4 services, adding up to a hefty $69 per month. That's insane, and almost certainly unsustainable, considering that over 50% of Gen Z and millennials surveyed had canceled at least one paid streaming service in the last 6 months. Because streaming has become so expensive, we're going to start seeing more people picking a streaming service like they pick a sports team, crossing their fingers that the new releases will be good enough to justify sticking with it.
Why?
Well, support the team.
Sure, you could drop Netflix after binging Inventing Anna just so you could afford to subscribe to Apple TV for Ted Lasso, but are you really going to go through that hassle every single month? That's incredibly annoying. The reality is, if you can't afford to subscribe to both, your options are to either pirate Ted Lasso or just never watch it. Neither option is a win for the consumer. Unfortunately, it's not just the fractured nature of exclusive content that's the problem. It's that streaming companies now have absolute control over everything. They get to call all the shots, from what gets greenlit and the budget to how it's released. Warner Brothers famously killed Batgirl even though it was already filmed and they had already sunk $90 million into it. Why? Purely for a tax write-off. I'm sure their fans really love that. And have you noticed how those genuinely hilarious R-rated comedy films that define the 2000s aren't being made anymore? It's not because people don't want them, it's because streaming companies aren't interested in making them. Whether it's due to the relentless competition or Wall Street's insatiable hunger for growth, Netflix, once the golden child of video streaming, has steadily become less and less consumer friendly. For years, Netflix practically encouraged password sharing. It was part of their brand identity. Love is sharing a password. They tweeted that in 2017. In a complete reversal, they declared war on account sharing in 2023, forcing users to either pay extra for additional profiles or risk getting locked out. Other streaming platforms quickly followed suit. This wasn't about security or fairness, it was a blatant attempt to squeeze more money out of subscribers. To add insult to injury, Bezos, who has enough money to take joyrides to space, began forcing ads on Prime Video users even though they're already paying for the service. And predictably, many other streaming companies, including Netflix, have jumped on the bandwagon, offering ad-supported tiers that cost about the same as what you were paying already. This kind of blatant corporate greed is exactly what drives people to look for alternatives. And when all streaming services are doing the same thing, the only alternative is piracy.
Well, pirating is stealing. We didn't steal it, okay? We just downloaded it.
No, the website is called moviepirate.com.
And the other one is called freemovies/arg.
I'm starting to see a little bit of a pattern here because I also use one called stolenmovies.free.
In recent years, Netflix has become increasingly concerned about how easily people can avoid paying for their service. In the competition section of Netflix 2024 annual review, piracy gets mentioned several times. Back when Netflix first launched, its on-demand streaming experience had a major advantage over most pirate sites. The most common way to pirate something was with torrents, which required at least some technical know-how, and you had to wait for the content to download. Today, most pirate sites offer on-demand streaming with a user experience that's virtually identical to Netflix, but with more content and no subscription fee. Netflix piracy concerns are valid. They are losing billions of dollars, but it's not like the company is anywhere close to collapsing. In fact, despite doing everything in their power to piss off their own customers, like raising prices, introducing ads, and cracking down on password sharing, 2024 was one of their best years. It seems people have a surprising amount of loyalty to Netflix, even if the value proposition isn't always great. Subscriptions are incredibly sticky. Once you sign up for one, you're likely to stay subscribed. If Netflix was actually suffering considerably from piracy, then they would be much more aggressive in trying to shut down these illicit sites, but even then, new ones will inevitably pop up to take their place, so that's not really a long-term solution. If consolidation of streaming services isn't going to happen, then Netflix's only real path forward is to continue making high-quality exclusive content at a price point that makes people happy to pay for it. Judging by their recent growth in membership, it seems to be working for them, at least for now. The same can't be said for some of the other streaming companies. Ideally, we shouldn't be advocating for piracy because content isn't free to produce, so it shouldn't be free to consume either. However, in the current streaming landscape, even with an abundance of high-quality content, having to subscribe to multiple services at once just doesn't make a lot of sense. Piracy isn't going away. In fact, it will only intensify as these companies squeeze harder, driving consumers towards the very alternatives they claim to fight. The truth is simple. People don't pirate because they want to steal, they pirate because they're forced to, by inconvenience, outrageous prices, or content scarcity. And right now, streaming offers us all three. If these companies truly want to stop piracy, then they need to look in the mirror, because they're the ones causing it. So until they choose to fix the broken system that they themselves have created, it's a pirate's life for me.
That's what it would look like if I was reading this news for the first time about the Microsoft price increases. But I read it earlier and I already got all my frustration out of the way privately, screaming into a pillow. This isn't some make-believe fish paste, a little video game industry boogeyman here with some false reports. This is confirmed that Microsoft will be increasing all of their prices across the board on hardware as well as accessories. And most notably, they are increasing the price on their Xbox first-party games to $80, following in line with what Nintendo's doing with some of their games. Now, you may notice, if you've got some keen peepers on you, I'm not in my normal domain. I'm in a hotel room. I'm in hiding, because I knew I'd need to escape because I'm about to criticize Nintendo again while talking about Microsoft, and Nintendo fans don't like that. So you gotta play it safe here. Nintendo, I think, has set the trend here. They've broken the seal that $80 games will be accepted by people. And by people, I mean gamers, which is a different kind of person, because they will accept any kind of shit you feed them at any price point, it seems. And now, since that case has been made, with the Switch 2 making record-breaking pre-orders, apparently, Microsoft feels confident that they can do the same, and they'll follow suit, and I imagine other big boys in the gaming industry will also do the same, because being able to put the squeeze on gamers' piggy bank a little bit stronger is good for the bottom line. And since a lot of people are defending the $80 price tag, gaming companies are going to go in that direction, and thus it'll most likely be the new norm. But I am surprised it's happening this quick. I thought there'd still be more of a buffer before other big gaming industry giants jumped on board the $80 price tag. Now, of course, Nintendo's not solely to blame here. A lot of it will obviously fall on the uncertainty with tariffs and all of that. That's absolutely a factor here, no doubt. And obviously it's something a lot of people are unhappy about. Except for the mindless drones who do free PR for multi-billion-dollar gaming corporations fighting their battles day and night on Twitter in the trenches to defend their honor, just so they can continue to be exploited for their piggy bank. So anyway, it's been a lot of talk on this subject throughout the day. Everyone is, weighing in, and it's been a big discussion, but there's been a surprising lack of coverage and a lack of discussion around my hot ass and this fucking fart I'm about to shit out. I don't know if the webcam mic could pick that up, but that was American made. That's tariff-free right there, I'll promise you that. The point is, though, $80 games sucks. And it's not like the price tag is indicative of a quality increase across the board, because in a lot of cases, the main formula these gaming companies look to exploit is live service. So you're paying $80 for oftentimes games that are incomplete and are only tended to after you've paid the $80, and then they'll go in and try and make it better down the line. So you're paying more money for a less complete project in a lot of cases. Of course, that's not an absolute statement. That's not a blanket across the board. But in general, we've seen this a lot in recent years, where the idea is push it out now, let's make money now, we'll fix it later. And I really cannot understand how anyone could see the state that gaming is in right now and be like, yeah, it makes sense. I'll pay $80 for these games that keep coming out that are fucking broken on launch, missing half of the content that they've promised. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, that is pathetic. Like, no one should be happy about the direction of $80 games coming up right now. Anyway, though, I'd like to read you their pricing update that they just posted. As of May 1st, we have adjusted recommended retailer pricing for our consoles and controllers worldwide. We also expect to adjust the pricing of some of our new first-party games starting this holiday season to $79.99. Those titles purchased on the Xbox Store have the benefit of Xbox Play Anywhere, allowing players to buy once and play on console and PC at no additional cost. We understand that these changes are challenging, and they were made with careful consideration given market conditions and the rising cost of development. Looking ahead, we continue to focus on offering more ways to play more games across any screen and ensuring value for Xbox players. The rising cost of development is something I've talked about a lot, how every game costs like $100 million now, and like 6 years of development just baking it in the oven, only to come out and be just underwhelming. That is 100% on them. It's not like the industry norm. There are so many indie games that have proven you don't need $100 million budgets to deliver extraordinary experiences. It's just these suits, these fucking corpo zombies at the top of the food chain that are so delusional. They're seeing Hollywood investing $320 million in the fucking stinkerooskies like Electric State, and then being like, we need to do that for video games. So that's been the direction they've gone for the last, like, fucking, I don't know, almost 10 years now. But I have said very loudly for a long time, the actual future of AAA gaming is by doing smaller projects that require less time to develop and less money and smaller teams. That, to me, I feel like that's a no-brainer. Like, there are so many examples in recent years you can pull from of small teams or even one-man teams delivering game of the year like quality experiences. You don't need to be dumping hundreds of millions of dollars into the next Concord. Like, it's just a stupid path, but they keep talking about it like it's an inevitability, how development cost has to continue rising, and every studio needs 500 developers all working on Assassin's Creed Shadows 2. Like, it's just super unnecessary. It is so much bloat for no reason. Instead, just put your money where your ass is and just invest in good projects that don't need to be like a super grand slam to make a single oodle of money back on the investment. Like, just think about how much a game has to sell in order to be profitable in the AAA space right now. Even if you do have a game that does really well, it's a good chance it doesn't make any money back because you've put so much money into it over the course of so many years that it'd need to sell like a fucking $1 billion worth of revenue in order to see it go green even slightly. Whereas if you had a bunch of smaller projects that don't need to be these crazy miracle home runs to make money, you stand a chance. Like, I really think the Blumhouse model, this is the one I always mention, where Blumhouse finances like fucking 100 horror movies a year that all cost like $2 to $5 million. And you probably haven't even heard of half of these absolute turbo shitters, but they only need to make like $10 million, $15 million to be like a super success for the company. And they always do. It's very rare that a Blumhouse film doesn't make more than the budget because it's so cheap to produce and it doesn't take that long. So it's a model that is proven efficient and works. And there are so many games that prove that model works too. But AAA is just so hell-bent on just dumping as much infinite money as they can into like one or two projects over the course of so many years. And they just end up being like super safe, Weenie Hut Jr., uninteresting. And even if they do moderately well, it's not good enough because it needs to do extraordinarily well to make any money back because too much went into that fucking pit producing it. And it's only going to get worse now at $80 being the norm because more and more people are getting priced out of buying AAA games. So what's going to happen naturally, more and more people are going to start pirating the games. But anyway, I'm rambling about things I've talked about a lot already. It's just, this is something a lot of people saw coming with $80 being the new norm once that floodgate was opened. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, so it sucks to see. And yeah, I just kind of wanted to rant about it a little bit here. That's about it. So yeah.